seventh generation Yerushalmi, right? How his family had been living there 100 years before the Balfour Declaration. And his grandchildren are ninth generation Yerushalmis. And he concluded that we shouldn't look at it that we and the Arabs are doomed to live together, but that we are destined to live together, and let's make it work. Okay, so today, as we've noted, is the 100th year anniversary. November 2nd, 1917 was the Balfour Declaration, and keep in mind that at that point, Britain was the power of the world. The sun never set on the British kingdom, right? Whereas nowadays we look at Britain as, they gave us the Beatles, so we have appreciation for that, right? But certainly not looking at that. They're one of the larger countries, right? But not one of the, certainly then they were the power of the world.
And tea.
I'm sorry?
And tea.
And tea. Yeah, they threw great tea parties. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Right? And therefore, this declaration from the British Foreign Secretary really resounded for the Jews, but it really resounded through the world. And the statement is, as we have on our guide here, His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. Right? In other words, this does not mean that the Jews will have Palestine and that the religion will only be Judaism and no other religion can practice their religious rights or their political right or their civil rights. Right? And certainly in Israel today, it's the only time that all three monotheistic religions have been able to serve their religions freely. Certainly under Jordanian rule, when all the synagogues in the occupied old city were destroyed and access was denied to the Kotel, and gravestones from Jewish gravestones from Har Zayt and the Mount of Olives was taken to be used for construction and for lavatories, right? Certainly not like it was happening then. So there is, and also there is civil rights. Shalom, shalom. There certainly is civil rights for all there, and all enjoy the same health system, and the minorities, the non-Jews who make up, actually it was a non-Jewish Arab Supreme Court justice who ruled on a previous president of Israel for his impropriety, right, Katsav, and sent him to jail. So, and at the same time, it's important that they write that this will not affect the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. This will not be a reason to say, all right, now all Jews need to leave, right? Which actually is what the Arab countries did, right? When there are cries of, these hysterical, ludicrous cries of genocide against Israelis, against the Jews. Well, actually the Palestinian population there has quadrupled since 1948. So obviously we're not very good at genocide, if that's what we are attempting to do. And as Hillel Neuer called out beautifully at the UN, Algeria, where are your Jews? He called out each of the Arab countries right? With all your talk about Israel, where are all of your Jews? So this Balfour Declaration really, well, I wrote underneath there, Balfour's Declaration gained the standing of international law when it was ratified by the League of Nations in 1922. The Balfour Declaration paved the way for a fairly large-scale Jewish immigration to the land of Israel from 1920 to 1939, thus setting precedent and paving the way for the United Nations to vote to establish a Jewish state in Palestine. That was the partition, dividing Palestine into a Jewish state and an Arab, we want to call it Palestinian state, which took place in 1947. Now, in this letter that I mentioned earlier from President Rivlin, he spoke about, again, him being a seventh generation Jerusalemite, Yerushalmi, his grandchildren thereby being ninth generation Yerushalmis, and that he was there, this family was there 100 years before Balfour Declaration, and already before that time there was a Jewish majority in Yerushalayim. So we're not talking about imperialism. We're talking about the Jews finally returning back to the land which had been ours, which had been conquered all the times in between. Now, this is not the first time that our return to Israel was predicated on non-Jewish nations giving sanction to it. Actually, in our Tanakh, in our scripture, in the book of Ezra, which is the second source we have, the book of Ezra, which is the second commonwealth, which is after the Babylonian exile of 70-year exile, which followed the destruction of the first temple built by Shlomo HaMelech, built by King Solomon, and with the exile of Israel, the Babylonian exile. At the end of that point, we read in the book of Ezra, Uvishnat achat l'koresh melech paras, in the first year of Cyrus, the Persian king, lichlot devar Hashem mipir Yirmiyahu, the completion of the word of Hashem came from the mouth of Jeremiah, Heir Hashem et ruach koresh melech paras. So God aroused the spirit of Cyrus, the king of Persia, v'yaver kol b'chol malchuto, and he issued a proclamation throughout his whole kingdom, v'gabu mechtav, and he also put it in writing, Lamor, saying, Ko amar Koresh melech paras. So says Koresh, the king of Persia, Kol mamlechot ha'aretz natan li Hashem elokei hashamayim. All the kingdoms of the earth have been given to me by God, the God of the heavens. V'hu pakad alai, and he has instructed me, commanded me, put it upon me, livnot lo bayit b'Yushalayim asher b'Yehuda, to build for him a house in Yerushalayim, which is in Judea, right? As we've all heard, right? The land was always known as Judea. It was only the Romans want to eradicate any Judaism and any Jewish connection to the land, that they changed the name from Judea and they gave it this Palestina, Syria name, right? So any linkage between the present-day Arabs who live there, who have taken the name Palestinians, and the Plishtim, the biblical nation that live there, is pure and absolute fantasy.
There's no connection whatsoever.
Correct. Mi bachem. And therefore Korash called out, Mi bachem mikol amo. Who is among you from all of his people? Yehi Elokav imo. May his God be with him. V'ya'al Yerushalayim. Ascend. Go up to Yerushalayim asher b'Yehuda, which is in Judea. V'yiven et Beit Hashem. And build the house of God, the God of Israel. Hu ha'elukim asher b'Yerushalayim. The God of Jerusalem. The kol ha'nish'ar. Mikol ha'makamot asher hu gar sham. And anyone who remains from all the places where the Jews are now living, Yinasu'uhu anshe mekomo. Let the people of his place lift him up, help him. B'kesef, u'v'zahav, with silver and with gold, u'v'rechush, and with possessions, u'v'vehema, and with animals, im nidava, and with donations, lebeit ha'elokim asher b'Yushalayim. So that it is the nations of the world who are ushering in this new stage of our return to Israel is not new. Again, the building of the second temple came about through this impetus and this initiative that was pushed forward by King Korash, Cyrus, the Melech Pras, the king of Persia. Interestingly, when we look at Tehillim, so the question is, okay, but we're going to be touching upon, we'll soon see, the Babylonian Talmud, where we have, in Ketubot, we have the 3 oaths that were put on us, and that is the source for many well-meaning Jews who are anti-Zionist. Okay? Now, I don't want to vilify, right? There are different ways of understanding. And I'm comfortable, though I strongly disagree, I'm comfortable with the anti-Zionist strain, let's call it, of the Satmar Hasidim, right? Who, when there are troubles in Israel with the Jews, they get together and they say Tehillim for the welfare of their brethren, meaning that they disagree with the politics and with the steps that have been taken, but there are Jews in danger, and therefore they band together. Again, as much as I disagree with them, I can respect that stance. Where I have difficulty, troubles, is when it crosses the line into becoming buddy-buddy with Arafat and those who are trying to kill and maim any and every Jew that they can get their hands on. Right? And that is other groups, completely fringe groups, who you should know have been disassociated from the let's say a Satmar group which has disassociated itself from a Neturei Karta group, which in my mind very much crosses the line. But was that a one-time idea? A one-time idea that we could return to Israel based on the nation's agreement, but after that we need God to come and literally on the wings of eagles bring us back? Or even going forward, as we are today, as has happened today, can it come about through the help and the guidance and the allowance of other nations of the world, as it did, starting with Balfour, and then the League of Nations, and then the United Nations in 1947. So you had Balfour in 1917, League of Nations in 1922, and the UN in 1947. So there's a verse from Tehillim that we are familiar with. It's part of our daily davening. And we say there, Al tivtechu b'nedivim beven adam she'ein lo teshuah. Do not trust in princes, in the Son of Men. Don't put your trust in people, even if they are princes, even if they are men of stature, men of great power and position. She'ein lo teshuah. He does not have the ability to bring about teshuah, redemption, salvation. On that, the Radak, who's one of the classic commentators, who is printed in the Nevi'im, in the prophets, he writes as follows: Al tiptechum nedivim v'nadam she'en l'teshuah lo birtzon hakel yitbarach ein biyad ha'adam lo shia chavero mitzarato. If it is not the ratzon, the will of God, then no person has the ability to save his friend from his troubles. Ki Hashem levado hateshua. God alone is the one who can solve our problems. That does not mean that we don't turn for help to people who can help us. And it does not mean that people who can help say, what are you coming to me? Go to God. What it does mean is that we understand that ultimately, whoever we go to is serving as a shaliach, as a messenger, as an emissary, to carry out God's will. V'hu yisovevena al yidei b'nei adam. But, he says, he will cause it to come about. He will orchestrate it al yidei b'nei adam, through the hands of people. So in different situations, right, if necessary, when necessary, one goes to the best doctors. Understanding that you want to get the best shaliach, the most skilled representative to give you, to help you, to help the person in need. Kamosha Sivev, the same way that God orchestrated Teshuat Galut Bavel, the redemption of the Babylonian exile, Al Yedei Korash. That came about through Korash, through Cyrus. V'chein la'atid. And the Radak writes, and so too in the future, Yisavev, or Yisuvav Gulat Yisroel, the redemption of Israel will come about. The Radak is talking about I'm not sure exactly when, but my guess is the 11th or 12th or 13th centuries when the Radak is writing. So this is well after, this is 1,000 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, and we're 1,000 years into the exile that we are presently in. He writes, so too in the future, Yisuvav Gulat Yisrael Adei Malchei HaGoyim. The redemption of Israel will come about through the kings of the nations. Sheyair et rucham, that God will arouse their spirit. L'shalacham, to send us out of our exile and back to Israel. So there the Radak is letting us know that clearly, as it was with Ezra, so too it will be with us, that it's going to be done through the consent and the involvement of the nations of the world. Now, the issue at the eye of the storm is this Gemara in Ketubot, the Babylonian Talmud Ketubot 111a, Kuf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph. And there we learn, it is, right, it's like a backwards L, it looks like a shoe, the Gemara. So we have it in Hebrew and English, but in Hebrew it is the second of the wide lines. Gimel Shvuot Halalu Lama. What are these three oaths that the Gemara had referred to? Achat, one oath, Shelo Yalu Yisrael B'choma, that Israel will not ascend, the nation of Israel will not ascend back to the land of Israel, B'choma, right, with choma, with a wall, right, which Rashi, the very top of the page there, I kept the Rashis for this reason. Shelo yalu b'choma yachad b'yad chazakah. We shall not go up together with a yad chazakah, with a strong arm, with force. We will not, by force, take the land of Israel. Number one. V'achat, and another, Shehishbiya Kadosh Baruch et Yisrael shelo yimredu b'umot ha'olam. God put an oath onto the children of Israel that we will not rebel against the nations of the world. Thirdly, va'achat, Shehishbiya Kadosh Baruch et Ovdei Kochavim, that God has put an oath upon the nations of the world, literally upon the idolaters. Shelo yishtabdu bahen v'Yisrael yoter midai, that they will not overly oppress the children of Israel. Those are the three oaths. Number one, that we don't go up in strength. Number two, that we don't rebel against the nations of the world. Number three, that they don't work us over too hard. They're not mishtabed, right? Afflict, oppress us, yoter midai, beyond.
It's a little bit of oppression.
Yeah, well, yes, because that is, the exile is meant to contain that, right? The exile is meant to be oppressive until we return. But there need to be the limits. The Maharsha, who is the classic commentator, who is written in the back of the Talmud, on this he says, Vadai, dereshut l'chol echad mi Yisrael alot eretz Yisrael. Certainly every individual is able to ascend to the land of Israel. Ella shelo yalu biyachad b'yad chazakah. But we should not go together in strength. Uvelivnot lahem chomot Yerushalayim, to build for them the walls of Jerusalem. And that's why Nehemiah, who said, L'chu v'nivneh et chomat Yerushalayim, lo niyeh od cherpa, he said, let us build the walls of Jerusalem, that we should no longer be a disgrace, we should no longer be so vulnerable. Birshut HaMelech haya. That was with permission of the king. Kamo she'amar sham, like it says over there, V'af divrei HaMelech asher amar li. The words of the king that he sanctioned that to me. Yes?
Rabbi, if the nations of the world violate their
oath,
and number three, does that allow a negation of number two to protect ourselves?
Yes. Okay. So let's take a look. Good. Let's take a look at a number of these different opinions that were said about this. If we go to the third page, here we have the Rebbe of Ciner of Yoel Teitelbaum. Again, Ciner is the Hasidic group that is the most anti-Zionistic, viewing the creation of the state of Israel as an act that goes against the will of God, and the continuation of our being there as a sovereign state goes against the will of God, and that is what is holding up the coming of the Messiah. Again, that is within the community, I would say, of those who have a deep, abiding love for Israel. That is the extreme. Right? I'm not talking about those groups who are, celebrating with Arafat. Right? I'm talking about those who are within the group of Ahavat Yisrael, right? Of loving Israel and caring deeply about the plight of Jews everywhere. So he writes very, very sharply, very strongly. V'yesh tipshim. There are fools. Ha'omrim that say, Sheyan shaya b'haskamat rov ha'omot, who say that since this present return to Israel, the state of Israel, was with the agreement of most of the nations, Ein kan lo isur shavua, there is here no prohibition of the oath, v'lo isur havarala kates, and nor is there any prohibition of going against, of trying to hasten the redemption. That kol kach gavar hachashchut v'samiyut ha'inayim, and so great is their darkness and the blindness of their eyes, shenafal ala olam, that has fallen onto the world, litot, to err b'divrei havalam ke'elu, with such nonsense. Okay? That is his opinion. Now, the opinion of many others is not like that, right? As David had mentioned, Rav Shlomo Kluger is quoted as saying, if the king and the other governments, the nations of the world, Ovrim al hashavua, are going against their part of the oath, Rotfim et Rotfim et, I think I'm missing a word here, Azai Rashai li Yisroel, Rotfim et Yisroel, Umishabdim ahem, La'avor shvuatam. They are pursuing Israel and enslaving them. Right? Certainly, we would say that the pogrom after pogrom after pogrom after pogrom leading to a Holocaust. Certainly, we would say that they have far crossed the line of not being mishabed yoter midai. Therefore, gam kain az rushai Yisroel gam kain. So too we are no longer bound by this oath. The Or Sameach, the Meshech Chachma, Rav Meir Simcha of Dvinsk, wrote in a letter as follows: in this century, the rays of light shine forth with a great awakening through the channels of the great men of action, such as Montefiore and those like him, and from the rabbis of Tzvi Hirsch Kalischer from Tulirun, Eliyahu Gutmacher from Grinitz, to build and to develop Jerusalem and to remove its desolation, almost to the extent which the enthusiasts have widened the cause. Many rabbis stood in opposition, and even many rabbis who praised the matter in their hearts put their hands to their mouths in fear of the enthusiast zeal, right? If they were to come out in favor of his return, and in fear of the three oaths which Hashem made the daughters of Jerusalem swear. Now, however, divine providence has brought together the League of Intelligent Nations in San Remo, and a dictate was established that the land of Israel shall be for the Jewish people. Since the fear of the oaths has been removed with the permission of the nations. So, two factors at play here. Number one is, as Rashi had said, we're not allowed to go up in force. We were not going up in force. The world consensus, the League of Nations, had granted us this ability to be there. Once we're there and we're attacked, then of course we could do what we do and can and must do whatever we can do to protect ourselves. The other factor of the nations having their oath, which they have completely abrogated, so that means that we too are no longer bound. So again, divine providence has brought together the League of Nations and it is established that the land of Israel should be for the Jewish people. Since the fear of the oaths has been removed, with the permission of the nations, the mitzvah of settling the land of Israel arises. Now we have the mitzvah of settling the land, a mitzvah equal to all of the other precepts in the Torah. The mitzvah of settling the land of Israel, like many other mitzvot, in a certain way is considered equal to all of the mitzvot. And this mitzvah returns to its place. This mitzvah, which had been on delay because of these oaths, is no longer being pushed aside because of these oaths. It is a mitzvah on everyone to help with all of their power to observe this mitzvah. And if Hashem, may His name be blessed, will allow this to come about, and if the matter will increase and expand, right? Realize he's writing this before the state of Israel. He's writing this in response, I believe, to the Balfour Declaration. Then surely it is a matter which stands, as we say in Hebrew, berumo shel olam. It stands at the zenith. It stands at the highest place in the world. So that is the crux of the argument within the Torah world. How do we view these three oaths today? There are those that say they've got to be kept to. We have to keep ours, right? If someone else does something wrong, doesn't give us the right to do something wrong. Others say, interestingly, that these oaths are not brought down by the Rambam in Halacha. This is more of the Agadata, right? It's more figurative. It's more of a, right? It's not a halacha lamasa, which means practical, therefore one must or one must not. But even those who would view it as such will say, the other way of looking at it is, we didn't go up in force. The League of Nations, the United Nations, granted it to us, right? It can't mean that everyone in the world will agree. Because that never happens. The question is this being done with the consensus of the nations of the world? And it certainly was done in such a way. And additionally, that with what the Jewish people had been subjected to during this exile, then certainly this idea of them not over subjugating us, that clearly was breached, and that allows us then to take the steps that we need to take in order for our self-preservation and to be there to return back to Israel. Just two more interesting quotes I wanted to share with you is Rabbi Toloshkin, right, quotes Lord Balfour in his own words. And this is, the treatment of the Jewish race has been a disgrace to Christendom, he declared on one occasion. And he saw his support for a Jewish state as an act of amends. Right? Pope John Paul II acknowledged in, I forget the name of the document, but where the church in their official policy stepped back on many things against the Jews, right, noted that the Holocaust took place in the cradle of Christianity, right, not in some third world country, but in Europe, in Western Europe, in the cradle of Christianity, right, must be a cause for pause.
It's interesting, though, that Balfour, for all of his stature, refers to the Jewish people as a Jewish race.
Yeah.
Even he did not differentiate between a race and a people.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're so ingrained.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I find it so offensive.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's fascinating because when you go to Israel and you go to the Kotel Friday night and you see Jews of every color, stripe, and hue and country of origin, right? It's not much of a race. Lady Dugdale, Balfour's niece, reported that near the end of his days, he said to me that he felt what he had been able to do for the Jews had been the thing he looked back upon as the most worth doing. No small words from a man who had been England's Prime Minister as well as Foreign Secretary. And also a fascinating conversation between Chaim Weizmann and Balfour. Weizmann said, Mr. Balfour, supposing I were to offer you Paris instead of London, would you take it? He sat up, looked at me and answered, but Dr. Weizmann, we have London. That is true, I said. But we had Jerusalem when London was a marsh.
Swampland.
Yeah, interesting. We had Jerusalem when London was a marsh. He leaned back, continued to stare at me, and said two things which I remember vividly. The first was, are there many Jews who think like you?
Wow.
I answered, I believe I speak the mind of millions of Jews whom you will never see and who cannot speak for themselves, but with whom I could pave the streets of the country I come from. That's how many Jews feel this way. I'm speaking on behalf of millions of Jews. To this he said, if that is so, you will one day be a force. And those words certainly came about. Certainly came about.
Rabbi, something troubles me. If God gave the land to the people of Israel, then who are the nations to consent? They're just nations. God gave it to them. If they consent, they're just merely acknowledging
Correct.
God's authority.
Correct. Nevertheless, there are these oaths that part of the exile was that we would not return in force. And that's why we note that Korash Cyrus is the one, right? And were it not for these oaths, I would agree with you. Right?
But shouldn't Moses' command be higher then?
Yes, but we go through different phases of our history, right? And our understanding from the Talmud is that these oaths were put in place, but again, there's debate, but the way I understand, and certainly the way the sources that I'm emphasizing today understand, is that it no longer applies. But yes, the Moses Law, ultimately that's where we are certainly meant to be back. What they're arguing about is the means, the mode of it happening. Right? Will it be on the wings of eagles? Though the Jews of Yemen and other countries, when Israel sent these airplanes to bring them, and they never had seen, these countries were quite backward, and they had never seen that. To them, that was simply the fulfillment of the prophecy of returning on the wings of eagles. It was just so incredible to them.
How ironic that the government of Iran has forgotten the words of Cyrus.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, they will often quote how good they've been to the Jews from that era.
Of course, metaphorically, they were right. It happened to be planes, but it was really on the wings of angels.
Yeah, that's correct. Aaron, yes.
Yes. When were those oaths taken and why?
So it's not. These are not. We say the daughters of Jerusalem. It's not that anyone lined up and took an oath. Right. What we're saying is there was this heavenly agreement. We speak of Knesset Yisroel. Right. We're not talking about the Knesset, and we're not talking about any group. We're talking about that this was an agreement. This was parameters that were laid out by God for the conclusion of the exile, which is based on that. The point you're bringing up, Aaron, right? The unspoken point that you're bringing up is why there are those that say this is not halacha, this is not Jewish law, this is not something that we signed up for, this is not something that is brought down in Rambam, in Maimonides, this is not something that is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. This is not right. This is a heavenly agreement, right? And it is in the realm of the Aggadata, of the Aggadic literature, which are the stories and the parables and the hyperbole and all of that, without it having this this practical halachic application. Though most feel that it does have that, but like I said, right, there are some. I quoted the Satmar Rebbe, right, and therefore we're bound that we can't breach. And the opinion of most is that it no longer applies, or minimally, once we have the state of Israel, right, then we should do what needs to be done to maintain, strengthen, both spiritually and physically, the Jewish presence that is there. So, it's something that we often take for granted.
Yeah.
But I was born into a world where the state of Israel was a reality, right? But for hundreds and actually thousands of years, the idea of the state of Israel in Israel was a dream, right? Right? Al narot Bavel gam yashavnu, there we sat, v'gam bachinu, we cried, v'zachrenu et Zion, when we remembered Zion. That was the state of the Jewish people for really thousands of years. And the fact that we are living in a time of a strong, reliant, vibrant state of Israel is incredible. and that the amount of Torah that was being learned in the world prior to the horrors of World War II have been matched and surpassed by the amount of Torah being learned in the world today between Israel and the United States and other places, but mostly Israel and the United States, is also just absolutely incredible. And we reached a point where majority of the Jews of the world, I believe we've reached this point already, where majority of the Jews of the world are there in Israel, right? This is truly, truly miraculous. And as we discussed before, without going into detail, whether this is the very end of the exile or it's the start of the Geula, right, wherever we are on that continuum, are we right before that line or right after that line, we clearly are living through incredible times, and certainly one of the major steps towards that which we are blessed with today and that which we unfortunately sometimes take for granted today is what took place 100 years ago today on November 2nd, 1917, with this Balfour Declaration. Yes?
I was just going to say that not all of the Jews living in Israel at that time supported this. My father was a Shiva Bacher there at that time, and when the Balfour, during the whole period, the whole upheaval, and he said the dissension in the yeshiva, who just want to leave us alone, shar still, don't rock the boat, and the ones so, we can have our own say. He said it was student against student for a long time there.
Yeah.
And in fact, it created real problems with their Arab neighbors, because my father said that before that came up, he and the Arab neighbors, they all lived still. They took care of their house, and the minute that happened, there was locking horns and passions flying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Change.
Yeah.
Radical change.
Yeah.
There was a price tag for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. There always is.
Yeah.
There always is a price tag for any move, and certainly what we view as a move forward, right? There's going to be price tags on that. Yeah. Yeah. But here we are, 2017, right? And looking back, and it's incredible. The world changed. Yeah. Nes Gadol Hayapo. Yeah.
If the three oaths came out, as you say, then it's very important that we not give up land today. Like.
Well, that really is a whole other discussion. That really is a whole other discussion. There was a point where there was room, in my opinion, room for debate about land for peace. Meaning, is it the right thing to do, is it the wrong thing to do? At this point, I don't think anyone thinks that actually giving up land will create peace. So it becomes almost like a completely moot issue. We had a security zone in Lebanon which we vacated, right? And Hezbollah went in there, right? We had control of actually, let me step back a little bit, right? With Egypt, it did create, right? Our return of the Sinai to Egypt, whereas there were many casualties, there had been many casualties consistently along the Israeli-Egyptian border. Once we had our peace treaty with Egypt, it's a very cold peace, right? But it is a sustainable peace, and there haven't been casualties along the Israeli-Egyptian border. So there it has worked, right? With the Palestinians, certainly the experiment in Gaza, right, was an incredible failure. And anyone who thinks, in my mind, in my opinion, anyone who thinks that doing anything in terms of giving up land by the West Bank, right, is to me is suicidal. That's my opinion.
That is very,
Yeah. Yes, Dov.
The Palestinians, their idea of giving up land is throwing rocks at us.
Okay. Yeah. So,
War.
yeah.
You know, like-
So we are living through historic times,
Yeah.
and we fasten our
Yeah.
seatbelts,
yeah.
and we look forward to a full redemption
Unreal.
that should follow, without all of the pain and without all of the mourning and without all of the sacrifices that unfortunately, tragically, continue to accumulate,
Yeah.
right, in Israel and abroad,
Sure.
with all of the terrorism
Crazy.
that is going on, right? Just yesterday in New York City, right? And that's what we're dealing. That's what we are dealing with. Yes, Bernard.
So the actual galut is not like we used to say galut. Now most of the people outside Israel, they are.
We're still. I would say, Bernard, we're still considering galut until we have, full peace, until we have a temple, until we right. So we are still considered to be in galut. We still speak about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Even though Jerusalem has been rebuilt very beautifully, there's a beautiful train line now, and beautiful buildings, and there's a wall of Astoria, right? And even the Kotel Plaza is beautifully done, etc., etc., etc. But the fact is, all of that is built around the destruction of the temple, the destroyed temple.